Hey everybody at Homewood, I hope everyone's doing well today. Well, this review's been a long time in the works and it's been a ton of fun. We're going to talk about the Martin-Logan Impression ESL speaker system. So, do me a favor, sit back, relax, and I'll give you my thoughts on how this performed. Well, as you saw in the B-roll, this is a big speaker system. And I apologize, I can only show you part of it and still get me in the picture. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and insert a spec sheet page with some incidental background music, and you guys can read it, look at it, and all that other stuff, and then we'll come back and talk about all of the various characteristics of this speaker system. Well, an impressive set of specifications. The measurements are great, I don't care, I measure with my ears, but for me the takeaways on this are we're combining two different kinds of speaker systems. We're combining an electrostatic panel with a conventional dynamic bass module. We've got two 8-inch long excursion woofers in there, each with their own DSP crossover and everything else on their own Class D amplifiers, each woofer getting 275 watts. And they do a really good job with that because they've got a handoff from the woofers to the mid-range panel, mid-range and high-frequency panel, and it's got to be seamless because, again, we've got two different kinds of technologies going on here. Now, electrostatic panels are driven differently than a conventional speaker. A conventional speaker just takes the output from the amplifier and, boom, converts it into motion. With an electrostatic panel, we have to apply a bias voltage to the panel. So there's a big transformer in there that applies a bias voltage, and then you slide in the audio signal on top of that, and that's what causes this to work. Now, we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the electrostatic panel portion of it, and I will also, too, we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into the bass module. I've got some cutaway pictures and things like that I want to show you, but first, before we do that, I'd really like to tell you a little bit about Martin-Logan. Well, let's turn the Wayback Machine to the late 1970s in beautiful Lawrence, Kansas, where two gentlemen, Gail Martin Sanders and Ron Logan Sutherland, met at a local hi-fi shop, and they were both electrostatic speaker aficionados. And just to give you a little background, electrostatic speakers are nothing new. The very first patent was issued to a GE engineer back in 1927. And then in the 1950s, a very famous audio engineer and designer, Peter Walker, started a company called Quad, and you've heard of them, and he started to bring electrostatic speakers into the consumer market, and actually it was before stereo. I think I got a picture of a husband and wife sitting in front of their single quad speaker in their hi-fi system in their home in the 50s. Well, Quad was the one who started, again, developing that electrostatic speaker product for consumers. But electrostatic speakers, like all kind of flat panel speakers, have some limitations, as do all speakers, but they have some unique limitations because of their design. Well, Gail and Ron thought they could do a much better job, and so they set out to build a better mousetrap, as it were. And of course, that's what everybody wants to do. So in 1983, they introduced at the Consumer Electronics Show I think it was in Chicago, the Monolith, which was their very first hybrid electrostatic speaker system. And it was a revelation. Martin-Logan quickly garnered a reputation for pushing electrostatics forward, developing curved panels rather than a flat panel, and which gave obviously much wider dispersion and obviously integrating advanced materials and combining this hybrid technology of an electrostatic and a dynamic speaker product. And over the years, they came out with lots of different versions of it. There's several different versions of the ESL product from them. And also, I think you have the Motion series, and that's where they came out with more of a conventional box speaker, but with a folded motion tweeter in it. And, you know, you've got the Statement, you've got the Neolith. This is part of the Masterpiece series. Martin-Logan is a very interesting company. Their founding statement was truth in sound, and they've always pursued that. Now, Mr. Sanders and Mr. Sutherland are no longer with the company, but the company still follows those design criteria, and obviously very, very excellent manufacturing. The speakers are all manufactured in Canada, and just really wonderful build quality. really, really good. So let me do this. I'd like to take a minute. We're going to talk about ESL panels. We'll do some more stuff. I built a playlist for you guys with some listening tips, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But let me reconfigure so we can talk about these panels. Well, the Impression 11 ESLs live in the Martin-Logan Masterpiece series of products. There are a couple other speakers in the lineup, some beautiful, beautiful product. The things that I find interesting about Martin-Logan designs are not only the curved electrostatic panel, and that is really unique, but it is the way they have the panel handoff to the bass module, this hybrid. It's fascinating. Now, the bass module, as you saw, or as I will discuss with you a little bit more, has its own DSP, amplifiers, crossovers, everything in its box. Now, electrostatics, again, they have a huge transformer that applies a bias voltage to the diaphragm. We'll talk about that just briefly. But they run this panel down to 300 hertz, and that's kind of at the bottom end of more or less the human vocal range. So it's almost mid-bass in that category. So this thing plays a very wide frequency response. And the handoff between the bass module and the electrostatic panel is absolutely seamless and extraordinarily well done. So let's talk about electrostatic panels real quick. An electrostatic panel operates different than a planar magnetic panel, like a magnepan. In a planar magnetic panel, you have a diaphragm, and then you have a wire that's etched or applied to the back of that panel, and the actual music signal is sent through that wire like a voice coil on a conventional speaker. And then the panel, the actual diaphragm, lives between two magnetic panels, and as that current fluctuates on the diaphragm itself, it pushes and pulls itself within the magnetic field of the front and back magnet. Now, an electrostatic panel works entirely differently. There's a huge transformer in the base of the unit that applies a bias voltage. So you have a coated diaphragm that lives between two stators. That's what the panels on the front and back are. And actually, the speaker operates on static electricity. So to get the speaker to move back, you apply a negative voltage or a negative static charge to the rear stator. You want it to move forward, you apply a positive voltage to the front stator, and it's that push-pull that causes the diaphragm to move. So the actual speaker works on static electricity. So there's a bias voltage applied to the diaphragm, and the music signal is sent to the stators, and depending on the phase of the music, plus or minus, it causes that diaphragm to move in and out. One of the things that makes an electrostatic very interesting is that diaphragm can be super thin, so it can respond really quickly to transients. Just very interesting. So the curved electrostatic panel is very unique. The implementation of it is extraordinarily well done. We'll talk about that in the summary. But let's take a second. I want to tell you about the bass module. So the bass module, the bass portion of these speakers, is really fascinating. It's really well thought out, and it's got some technologies in it that normally I kind of would be a bit reticent about talking about because I'm not a big fan of some of them. But in this instance, it is all about the overall performance of the product. So the bass itself, the bass module, each bass module has two 8-inch aluminum cone woofers with cast baskets, very long throw. Each has their own 275-watt Class D amplifier on them. They're all managed by a 24-bit DSP engine that actually contains Anthem room correction. Now, I didn't run them with Anthem room correction for this review. I will do a separate review on Anthem room correction, and I will give you my summary of thoughts how they performed with the Anthem room correction on. But again, I didn't listen to them with that enabled for this review. Now, each of the interesting thing is, and again, this DSP, I'm not a fan of DSP as a general rule, but what we're talking about is very low frequency DSP. So the issues I have with DSP, especially mid-range and high frequencies and things like that, are not present because we're talking about 300 hertz on down for the bass module. Now, one of the things that DSP allows you to do is when you have a woofer in a cabinet, as that woofer is moving in and out, obviously there's energy going forward and there's energy going back into the box. So that pressure can actually cause the woofer to move forward when it really doesn't want to or shouldn't to make those notes. So what Martin-Logan developed was what they call power force forward technology. Now, what it does is it can change or adjust, the DSP can monitor and change or adjust the phase of the woofer so that that back wave energy doesn't cause a distortion or cause unwanted movement in the woofer. I think that's really cool. Very interesting. Now, the panel itself is called an air blade, and it's curved and it's just magnificently built. Now, the cabinets are super solid. Everything is super high quality on this. This is a beautiful aircraft grade aluminum frame for the the electrostatic panel. This is rigid, reduces vibrations tremendously, but you got to be careful. You can't pull it around by the panel. These speakers weigh 90 pounds. They're really heavy, and I had fun getting them down here. Thank goodness I had my son come, or my oldest boy come and help me. So anyway, as far as build quality and everything else, these are absolutely top notch. Low end, mids, highs, everything. We'll talk about that more in the summary. So let me do this. Let me tell you a little bit about the equipment I used to test it. I did a specific playlist just for these speakers. I think there's 17 or 18 songs in it, but I'm only going to talk about 3 that I highlight, and it's a listening guide. It's not like, oh, this musician played this instrument and it was recorded at this studio in Oslo, Norway, or whatever. It's going to be more of a listening guide than it will be just kind of a how the recording was made kind of thing. So let's do this. Let's talk about how I tested it. We'll talk about the music, and then I'll give you my summary. Well, before we dig into the details on this speaker system, I need to make some sort of disclaimer, as it were. I get a lot of comments where, is this better than that? Is it, what's the best? All this other stuff. In any of this, there is no best. The best thing in the world is the one you like. And that's really the bottom line. So you're hearing my subjective thoughts. I'm not going to compare this to another speaker system because it is unique unto itself. I'm not going to compare it to the Magnepans. I'm not going to compare it to a dynamic speaker. You can't. Here's the way to think of it. And I've probably used this analogy before. You take 3 Michelin-starred chefs. You give them all exactly the same ingredients, and you send them off to go make a dish out of that. Are you going to get 3 identical dishes? No, you're going to get each individual chef's personal take on that set of ingredients. Are any of those dishes going to taste bad or be terrible? Well, no, there might be one you like a little better than the other, but they're all going to be good. And that's the point of all of this. In the hi-fi world, the best speaker in the world is the one you like. The best amplifier in the world is the one you like. When you start getting into this category of product, it is different flavors of very good. I will tell you that right up front. So no, I'm not going to do direct comparisons with the Magnepans. And honestly, I haven't had a chance to listen to the Magnepans as long as I've listened to these. So this review is going to be a standalone on this particular product. Maybe some point in the future, I'll do some sort of reasonable comparison of sound quality or whatever. But all we're dealing with is really just subtle different shades of very good. That's the point. And again, I'm a subjective reviewer. All you're getting is my opinions. And I obviously have my own particular taste. And if I say things or describe the sound of things that you've had a chance to hear and it kind of lines up with what you like, well, then my reviews obviously have some merit. If it doesn't, well, you're welcome to disagree. Everybody's got their own taste. So that's that. So let's dig into this a little bit. Well, for the test gear, I'm going to go through it real quick, but I'm going to break it down kind of by category. So for integrated amplifiers, I used 3. I used the Advanced Paris A12 Classic at $4,500. That's not too far out of the price range for these. That was really good. I used the Soul Note A2. That is a very high-end, magnificently engineered Japanese integrated amplifier at about $7,000 or so. And then I used the Black Ice F22, which is a full tube integrated amplifier. And depending on the tubes that you have in it, it's somewhere around $3,000 or so. Now, for standalone amplifiers, I used 3. I used the Pearl Acoustics 7040. I used the Jungsung JA99C 80 watt Class A room heater of an amplifier. And that thing is a steal at about $1,200 or $1,300, maybe less than that. And then to get the angels to sing and to just find Nirvana, I used the Electro Compagnie EW300Ms that you saw in the B-roll, the big monoblocks that are sitting on the floor. And at 30 grand for the pair, you'd think so. Amazing. Now, preamps, I used a couple different combinations, and I used various amplifier and preamp combinations through my listening phase with this. I used the Advanced Paris XP700, which is rapidly becoming, at $2,500, is rapidly becoming one of my favorite preamps. I used the Black Ice F360, which again, at about $3,000 or so with a tube in it. Oof, that's a magnificent preamplifier. I used the Jungsung JA1. I only used that with the Jungsung amplifier. That is a very nice preamplifier, but it's a little cool sounding, I didn't find it to be kind of in my wheelhouse exactly, so I didn't use it for everything. And I did use the Electro Compagnie EC 4.8 Mark II Magic City with that one as well. So for sources, I streamed everything from my Artivana server. I used my vinyl rig, which is my Fluence RT85 with an AT moving coil cartridge and the Cambridge Alva Duo phono preamp, as well as the Vista Audio phono preamp, which I did a review of, and I don't know if you've seen it yet. As I mentioned earlier, I don't always release them in sequence. So I use those two phono preamps. I did for a brief period of time use a phono preamp built into the Amplifiers XP700, and that was quite good as well. For DACs, I use different DAC combinations. Now, I used most of the DACs with a DDC reclocker because I just think it absolutely sounds better that way. So I used the Live Harmony with the Singer SU1 as well as the Live Micro DDC. I used the Musician Pegasus with the Singer SU1 along with the Live Micro DDC. I used the Live Micro DAC with the Micro DDC, but not for a long period of time, because I will tell you that the Pegasus and either the Singer SU1 or the Live Micro DDC, that combination compared to the Micro DAC from Live and the Micro DDC, those combinations are so close together. They're very close together in price, but they're so close together in performance that it near as makes no difference which one you want to go with. They're both excellent. Now, I did, for some nostalgia reason, but also to get a chip-based sonic signature, I used the Gishelli Daisy, and that has the upgraded Sparkos op amps in it, and I used that with the wired for sound Spidiff Remedy reclocker. That was a great combination. And then again, to get another kind of chip-based multi-bit sound, I used the Schiit Gungnir, and I used that with the Matrix X Spidiff 3 DDC reclocker. So that's all the equipment. Hang on. So give me a minute. So for cabling, for most of the listening, I used the Crescendo HPVL10 cryogenically treated speaker cables. They're not cheap at $4,300 for a 10-foot pair. I also used the ST12F cryogenically treated power cable on the preamps only. And I used some other really high quality power cables for everything else. I used, one of my favorites now is the Amplifiers link cables. They are beautiful sounding, and they're beautiful from a jewelry standpoint. They're gorgeous from a sonic standpoint. They're gorgeous. I also, and it's been my mainstay cable brand for a long time, is the WireWorld cable brand. And you saw in the B-roll that I'm using WireWorld Stratus power cables to power the bass modules and DSP engine in the Martin-Logans. And that's a great combination. I use their Crescendo speaker cables. I use their balanced and line level RCA cables. Wonderful stuff. Everything sits on isoacoustic isolation, and I use USB isolators between the Artivana server and any of the DACs. So that's all the equipment. Now, give me a minute and I'll tell you about what I thought the best synergies were. Well, it's going to go without saying that the Electrocompagnie monoblocks and the Electrocompagnie preamp, and actually the Electrocompagnie monoblocks with almost any of the preamps, that was nirvana. It's just magnificent. Those amplifiers have the power to, I think they could probably jumpstart a 747. They're so powerful and clean and just have a beautiful sonic signature. You'll learn more about those in the review of them. Obviously, the Electrocompagnie amplifiers with the EC 4.8 Mark II preamplifier was a magic combination. I was completely surprised by the Amplifiers XP700 with the Electrocompagnie amplifiers. Magic combination. Same with the Black Ice F360. The Thomas's preamp sounded really good with that as well. So there was a bunch of really good combinations. Overall, in order of amazingness, Electrocompagnie, the whole stack, with the Live Harmony of the Musician, the Pearl Acoustic 7040 with the Advanced Paris preamp or the F360 or Thomas's preamp, really great. The Junction JA1 with any of the preamps on it was remarkably good. I thought the Junction JA99C amplifier with any of the preamps other than the Junction preamplifier, that thing is amazing for its money. With the F360 on it or Thomas's preamp, and you'll hear about it in the review of that unit, magic. Got these things singing. Just remarkable. So let me do this now that I've bored you with all of the equipment, but you need to know the synergies. And I was able to get really good synergies with a lot of these combinations. Actually, most of them. Let's talk about some of the music I use. So hopefully you can try to hear what I'm hearing or make comparisons with your own gear. Well, as I mentioned, I did create a specific playlist for this particular speaker system, and there will be a Title and Qobuz version of it listed in the video description. Now, I use a service called SoundDiz to synchronize those two playlists across the different platforms, and sometimes there's songs in Title that Qobuz doesn't have, and I always start off with a Title playlist first. So sometimes there'll be tracks missing, and I apologize. It's just because Qobuz doesn't have them. That's it. Now, there will be in the community post section of my channel a full text version of the listening guide that if you want to refer to or cut and paste out, you can print it out. And they'll be much more in-depth on all, I think, 18 tracks. So anyway, go there for the full listening guide and playlist. So the first song I want to highlight is the song Can't Find My Way Home. Now, there should be some folks out there my age who remember that song. It was originally done in 1969 by the group Blind Faith on their only album, and it was written by Stevie Winwood and, I believe, Eric Clapton. The original recording is very gritty, very kind of that British Blue-Eyed Soul's late 60s recording, kind of a very forward mix, just normal kind of that era period of recording. This is a completely different take on it. Now, it's off a solo album by a gentleman named Nathan East. Well, who the hell is Nathan East? Nathan East is Eric Clapton's touring bass player. He also bass player for Foreplay. Also a very in-demand session musician and touring bass player for lots of other acts. And this is his solo album. Now, it is a completely different take on the song. As I mentioned, the original song's a bit gritty. This is a much smoother, more polished piece. It is very interesting. In the original version, Eric Clapton sang with a bit of a falsetto. Now, Nathan East does the lead vocals on this song. And again, he kind of does that falsetto, but his falsetto is a little higher pitched than Clapton, so it's got a different feel to it. This is very much more of, as I mentioned, kind of a smoother presentation. It's got a very good, very deep, very rich low end, got a really good steady groove. It's less kind of syncopated. I don't want to say syncopated, but it's a much smoother, much more stylistic version of the song than the original. So as you're listening, if you listen to Nathan East's vocals, it should be dead front and center, razor sharp, locked, and it should be about appropriate for someone between 5'8" and 6 foot something singing on a microphone. That's right where his vocals should be. Up off the ground, dead center, and just behind the speaker system. He's got some good texture in his vocals. Listen in on the quiet passages, because this song has some very nice quiet passages and then it builds. Listen in on his vocals and you can kind of hear him holding his notes a little bit. Now, for bass, what I want you to focus on the bass. The bass is beautifully recorded. Obviously, it's a bass player and it's his album. It's very full body, but it's not overbearing. It doesn't take over the song. You can listen. Man, listen for the articulation of his finger work. You can actually at points hear his fingers sliding on the bass. You'll also, curiously, and I'll talk about it in a second, Eric Clapton plays lead guitar on this. Pay attention to how the kind of, you hear the bass kind of as a foundation and more of a melodic presence than kind of really forward in the mix. It's not. It just kind of underpins everything that's going on. Now, Clapton's guitar, you'll hear it the minute he comes in. It's unmistakable. And I'm sure he's probably playing Blackie, his legendary Fender Strat. Just his guitar is beautiful. It's articulate. He's probably maybe one of the, top 5 guitarists in the entire world. I'll get some different comments on that. But for me, without question, he is. His playing on this is beautiful. It's a completely different interpretation. Obviously, he knows the song well. He's probably been performing it for, almost 60 years, for crying out loud. But his take on this is just smooth and beautiful. So in this, when you're listening, listen to in the balance. The mix is smooth and very deliberately restrained. It doesn't crowd you. It doesn't come at you forward. It doesn't come at you with tons of detail. It kind of more shoots for a more cohesive, kind of polished presentation. You listen for how the instruments kind of sit under the vocal without competing for attention, except obviously when Clapton's taking lead guitar and doing solos. Now, as far as imaging on a well set up stereo, East's vocals should lock dead center. The bass should have plenty of weight and presence. Now, the mix, obviously the imaging is done on the mixing board by the mixing engineer, but there is good placement of the instruments. Guitar and piano accents should be spread out gently to the sides. Nothing feels forced. The soundstage is very wide, but controlled. There's no sloppiness. There is good focus on the instruments. But again, for me, all I want is a general placement. I want the music to just kind of wash over me a little bit. And I think that is what this song does. And that's one of the reasons why I picked it. So this test track is far more about detail, balance, tone, refinement, then explosive dynamics. On a good system, it should sound natural, relaxed, and very emotionally engaging. On a lesser setup, I think you'll hear Nathan East's vocals can either recede too far back into the mix or depending on the type of speaker and the type of amplification and so forth, can sound way too forward. And the bass can get a little bit sloppy and lose kind of its warmth and texture. This is a really polished presence track. I think it's great for checking on how your system will handle vocals and how they will sit naturally against kind of a very smooth instrumental sort of lead through it. This is a beautiful track and one of my favorites. So after that really long description of it, the goal is to help you kind of hear what I'm hearing. And so I apologize for the length, but I got to go into a bit of detail. So anyway, let's talk about the second track I used. This next track is one that is just absolutely stunning. This needs to be on your playlist. It needs to be in your rotation. It is absolutely one of the most beautiful albums recordings, and this song is one of the most beautiful songs I can think of. Just magnificent. It is the song called The Age of Industry from Le Trio Jules Baran, and I know I'm mispronouncing it. The trio, are three Palestinian brothers, and they're all virtuosos on the oud, O-U-D. That's a Middle Eastern, I'll put a picture of it here, a Middle Eastern fretless lute with a big rounded, kind of bulbous body and kind of a short neck. Their music, their style is very much a Middle Eastern influence, very much an Arabic sort of modes and theme to it and kind of feel to it, but they blend contemporary arrangements, and they kind of, what they're trying to do is kind of weave in a lot of improvisation with very tight ensemble interplay. This is very contemporary, but also has a very traditional underpinning to it. This album, The Long March from 2018 of theirs, you got to listen to it. You got to put it in the rotation. Yes, it is kind of politically and emotionally charged, obviously, given what's going on in the Middle East. I'm not going to talk about that, but it mixes very kind of ancient timbers with very modern themes and very modern sorts of contemporary themes and obviously recording styles and so forth and everything else. The track stands out, this track, the whole album, but this track particularly stands out because it layers all three of the odes in this kind of interlocking pattern. And again, there's a lot of improvisation in here, and it kind of creates this very dense but very organic texture. The title suggests obviously contemporary, commentary on kind of modern mechanization versus sort of traditional artistry, very much that kind of traditional sort of Middle Eastern, clash of the modern versus the, traditional. I think it's really interesting. You'll hear there is tension in this. You'll hear tension in kind of the rhythmic drive, and there's a very kind of relentless pulse to this. I can't tell you how much this track is emotionally rewarding to listen to and also very thought-provoking. So I want you to listen to the microdynamics. Now, as each instrument comes in and out, they obviously varying intensity, and there's kind of subtle changes in attack and the pluck and the phrasing, not sheer volume, but just kind of that different sort of touch. Each musician has their own particular style. And what I want you to listen to, good gear will reveal those shifts in touch and expression. You should be able to hear each oud and each kind of player's sort of way of playing and their style of playing. In imaging and separation, what I want you to listen to is each of the three odes is panned in the stereo field. So on a well set up system, you should hear them as three distinct instruments in kind of this conversation they're having in the music. That interplay is really crucial because that's the whole point of this, is how they respond to one another and how they weave that tapestry of music in and out. On a really good system, you can follow each individual instrument and follow that very simply. Now, the other thing that's wonderful about these acoustic oud instruments is the resonance and decay. Each oud has its own rich overtones and kind of its own natural decay, again, depending on the length of the neck, the size of the body, the individual artist's kind of acumen on it. In a really transparent system, you should hear the shimmer and fade of each note hanging in the recording space, and it should kind of give you that sense of the wooden body of the instruments, kind of the size of the, the body of the instrument, and kind of how it hangs in air, kind of the air, the space around each of the notes. That's really important. Now, for rhythmic drive, the performance kind of has this hypnotic, kind of almost trance-like pulse to it. It kind of moves forward really, really interesting. If you pay attention, you need to pay attention onto whether your system conveys kind of a forward motion without smearing. You want to hear those fast plucks of the ouds without any blur in it. This is a really good test track. You should get that really good acoustic separation between the individual instruments. It's an excellent imaging test. Each instrument should occupy its own space in the soundstage. You should hear the fine detail of each pluck. There shouldn't be any harshness. You should be able to pull each of the three instruments out of the mix individually. It is really just a beautiful song, and on a really good system, you should be able to untangle that complexity and still get that kind of warmth sonic character of the body of the instruments in this really kind of smooth, engaging flow. I love this track. I love this album. And hopefully you'll hear the same. So again, another long-winded song, but again, I need you to understand what I'm hearing and compare it to maybe what you have, and obviously help you along in your journey. So the last track is coming up right now. So for the last track I want to highlight, it is a collaboration between Ravi Shankar and Philip Glass, and it's off an album called Passages from 1990, and the track is called Ragas in a Minor Scale. And this is one of those tracks that just works on so many different levels. It has its roots in traditional Indian classical music, but then you combine Philip Glass's well-known minimalism, Western minimalism, and rich sonics. This thing is just, what a wonderful piece to listen to. So the background and context of this, just so you know, this comes from a 1990 album called Passages, and it's a collaboration between Shankar and Philip Glass. Now, Shankar, obviously a legendary virtuoso on the sitar. Philip Glass, a legendary minimalist contemporary composer known for his very, interlocking rhythms and structures. This album is fascinating, and it alternates between Shankar and Glass's composition, with each taking the others and putting it and arranging those ideas into the song. So Ragas in a Minor Scale is a Shankar composition, but Philip Glass did the orchestration and the ensemble. It is his ensemble, and it brings kind of his orchestral sort of textures and flavors to it, and it really is a fascinating piece. So the result is you have this fusion of Hindustani ragas and, Philip Glass, pulsating Western harmonic layering. It's not purely traditional, and it's not purely minimalistic. It's something in between, and it makes it fascinating both musically and kind of sonically. It's just a fascinating piece, and we're going to do a little bit of a dive into that. So the listening focus on this particular track, kind of the audiophile notes, as it were, are, I want you to listen for the sitar's resonance. Shankar's sitar should sound both bright and woody because of the body and the length and all the different stuff. You need to hear the buzzing harmonics from the sympathetic strings. All the strings around it will buzz, obviously. A revealing system will capture the shimmer of those overtones without tipping into glare. You don't want to have it sound strident or bright or, harsh sounding, I guess. So there's going to be a ton of microtonality and bends as he works those instruments and plucks those, the strings. There should be kind of subtle pitch inflections that really will test a speaker system or your audio system's really fine pitch resolution. A lesser system, something that's not quite there, will kind of flatten those microtonality, those bends and everything else into kind of just a monotone sound. And it's not very rewarding and kind of be a bit irritating. So now also the other instruments they use is a tabla, which is kind of a percussion instrument. That should provide, and there's several different sizes of tabla, that should provide a kind of a rhythmic grounding. Each stroke should have kind of a clear attack and a very distinct tonal body depending on the size of the tabla itself. I want you to listen for textures in the skin sounds and not just the thump of the tabla, the striking the skin itself. Now, Philip Glass's ensemble. This is interesting because underneath the sitar is basically a full orchestra with all of its ensemble texture. So you have strings and woodwinds and all kinds of other stuff, and very much with Philip Glass's kind of interlocking motifs. On a good playback system, these layers remain transparent. They should not get muddy. It should not sound congested or confusing. Now, spatial scale. This is where it gets kind of interesting. This piece combines not only the intimate solo the intimate solos of the sitar and the tabla, but kind of this big sweeping orchestral mass of the orchestral players. And the resolving system should really present both the scale and intimacy of this simultaneously. And it's not an easy thing to do. So, system test stuff. Treble and extension and control of the treble. I think a sitar demands a system that can reproduce high frequency overtones with clarity but without harshness. It's easy to get a sitar to sound harsh on a kind of compromised system, and you're not going to find that here. Layer separation. Philip Glass's orchestral textures challenge a system's ability to keep the complex layers distinct, so you can actually listen into them and hear those distinct different layers. It's a really interesting, if your system can give you that resolution, it is a very rewarding thing to listen for. Now, dynamic shading, that's another thing. The music builds gradually. It's got a good system will convey these crescendos naturally without it sounding compressed, and that's a big issue for a lot of systems. And I want you to listen to it should sound very dynamic. It should sound effortless, I guess, and it does on this without question. So ragas in a minor scale is both a tone and texture test, very much so, and an imaging and layering test too. You should check for whether or not your system can handle kind of the intricate acoustic detail alongside the larger orchestral swells. Can you hear the pluck of the sitar? Can you hear the tap of the tabla? Can you hear the big sweeping orchestral pieces? And does it do it distinctly? Can you hear the layers? Can you pull an individual instrument out of all of that different layering? That will give you a hint on how good and how resolving your system is. So I promise that's the last song. Now, let's move on to my final thoughts. So the Martin-Logan Impression 11 ESLs. This is a truly remarkable speaker system. It is. And at $12,000 it should be. But I'll tell you, it punches above its weight without question. I am fortunate in that I've got a lot of really good speaker systems in. And the other thing too, and you need to understand this, is speakers are one of the most subjective pieces of a hi-fi that there is. If you love a $500 pair of speakers, God bless you, take that money and go buy music. If you're not satisfied with a $10,000 pair of speakers, you know what, maybe listen to a $500 pair of speakers and you might find what you're looking for. These are a remarkable speaker system, and they're not, the cool thing about them is they're not just about showing you every single last detail in a recording. I find that to be too analytical. I'm not a too analytical person. What I like about these speakers and other speakers like this in this category and in these price ranges is their ability to make that detail kind of come alive in your space. Not so much that the musicians are in the room with you, more like you're in the room with them. And I know that's a subtle difference, and it's a very hard one to explain. It's kind of less like you're listening to a speaker system and more like the music's just kind of there with you in the room, or you're there with the music in its room and in its staging and in the resonance of that room and where those instruments are placed in that room and in that space. These are truly staggeringly good speakers. They have, I can't tell you, it's hard for me to explain. The soundstage, well, first of all, frequency response on these, as far as the range goes, it's absolutely beautiful. They go low. I never had a subwoofer on them. I never felt the need for the subwoofer. The bass was very low and very articulate and so well defined. I think it is some of that DSP that's going on inside and the ability to control the woofers the way they do. The bass is just, it digs deep. Instruments in the bass, synths and acoustic bass instruments are so well delineated. Acoustic bass, which can get down to about 32 hertz, sounds just so beautifully rendered and so natural. And the strings and the finger plucking and the position and the hand moving on the neck and the body of the bass instruments, acoustic bass instruments, was so well rendered. It was just staggeringly good. any, electric bass, beautiful, the pluck, the subtleness. When the electric bass is underpinning some other instruments in the mix, you can just pull it out. The ability of these speakers to delineate individual instruments in the mix is remarkable. Just absolutely. And the handoff between, again, the panel running down to 300 hertz, that handoff between the bass module area and the panel is completely seamless. I never heard any anomalies. I never heard any phase anomalies. It just was smooth and seamless. And then this panel just went all the way up to the highest frequencies without anything. Dynamics are incredible, especially in the bass response. Transients were really well produced, and just the amount of detail rendered in the 300 hertz on up. I mean, bass detail was very well rendered, but that 300 hertz on up was so naturally reproduced that you forget you're listening to speaker. And being a bipolar speaker, it's just, the imaging is just staggering. There's that cancellation on the side because the front wave and the back wave are out of phase. But what you get is this soundstage that just defies your room boundaries. It is huge, and it is really well appointed. When you sit in the sweet spot, on vocals, the vocals just hang in the air, and they're in the air in the right spot. The instruments have this kind of you are there presence. Again, it is more like you're where the instruments are rather than like the instruments are where you are. And I guess that's the secret to really good imaging and really good soundstage. It's not, they're not playing in your room. Hopefully you're listening in their room. You're getting a hint of listening in their room. The bass on this bass module is it's absolutely remarkable. It's tight, it's controlled, it's fast. It is just so well defined. Kick drums hit cleanly. Bass guitars sound absolutely tuneful all the way down. Synthesizers on their low bass, because I listen to a lot of that electronica stuff. It's just absolutely beautiful. And the stereo imaging in the bass is amazing. Just absolutely wonderful. It's, what you hear isn't really two separate modules, because you've got the electrostatic panel and you've got the bass module. They're not two separate panels. It's like one continuous full range sound coming off these. The bass just kind of flows naturally into mids. And again, that crossover point of 300 hertz, I think, attributes to that, because bass, low frequency bass tends to be kind of non-directional, although these do a great job with stereo bass. Everything just kind of blends smoothly, and the mids and the highs they're effortless, and they just float in space. The soundstage is huge on this. It's room-defyingly large. It is very well appointed. I don't listen for laser focus, although I'm sure these can do laser focus, but a limitation of laser focus imaging a lot of times is the actual recording itself. I mean, if it's contemporary, not everybody's in the same room at the same time, and they might have recorded one on Tuesday and a bass on Thursday, and it's all mixed together by the engineer. So the mixing engineer controls a lot of that image focus. But well done, these things give you an image and a soundstage that's absolutely staggering. If they used across, I think it's called a Blumheim mic arrangement, like David Chesky does on a lot of his recordings, that imaging is beautifully huge and large and whatever, just absolutely staggeringly. Just amazing. This is a truly full range speaker system. You don't need a subwoofer for these. They're smooth, they're detailed, they're just a beautiful line. They have a bit of a warm character. That can be determined by the electronics you hook up onto it. Like the Soul Note is a little bit of a cooler sounding amp, and you get a little bit, I think these are true to the source, true to the amp. They'll be true, they're a bit forgiving, which I love. That's important to me because of that warmth. They have a little bit of that engaging warmth that I just love so much. And from an imaging standpoint and from a dynamic standpoint, these are just absolutely phenomenal. It is, without question, they're one of the finest speaker systems I've ever had in this room, and maybe one of the finest speaker systems I've ever listened to. These things just give you that classic Martin-Logan transparency, that holographic imaging, that kind of that sense of space and just presence that electrostatics, these bipolar electrostatics give you. Combine that with the bass module, it is just a very incredibly full range, incredibly rewarding, incredibly detailed, engaging. I can listen for days. And it's just so rewarding. It's one of the finest speaker systems I've ever heard. The Martin-Logan Impression 11 ESLs. This is a remarkable speaker system. It is truly engaging. Just wonderful. It's been a privilege for me to review these. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you'd be willing to give me a like and your subscription, and maybe ring the bell so you get notified next time I put out a video. About 58% of you, the number's going down, by the way, I appreciate that. About 58% of you who watch the videos aren't subscribed. And your subscription would help a lot. Now, I don't do this for money, but when I have a good subscriber base, what it does is demonstrates to other manufacturers that it might be in their best interest to loan me some product to review so we get to enjoy it all together. Because this is about enjoying music as much as it is about finding fun product to play with. So I would appreciate your subscription a great deal. I would like to take a moment, special thanks to my channel members and my current subscribers. Your guys' support has been invaluable. Thank you so much. If you have interest in joining the channel, there will be a membership link in the pinned comment and in the video description. There will also be a link to Martin-Logan's website in the pinned comment and in the video description. I have no affiliation with them. I have no monetary interest in whether or not you like the speakers. There will also be a link in the video description to the playlist I used that I created for this. There will also be a link, if I can do it, in the video description to the community post where all of my listening notes and thoughts are so that you can print those out, look at them, and see if you hear what I hear. Hopefully you find that of some value, and I would like to know if you do in the comments. There are some affiliate links in the video description. Whether you use them or not, that's fine. There is a community post playlist that you can, if you have a playlist, send it to me, I'll post it. I think that's everything. Comment, let me know your thoughts. Where are you at in your journey? Please like, subscribe, comment, follow me on Instagram if you want to. Yeah, I think that's everything. My name is Ed Homewood. This is the Old Guy Hi-Fi channel, and I hope you enjoyed this video a lot. And I think, do me a favor, please, take that community post playlist that I put together for this, either from Tidal or Qobuz or the printed version, compare your notes to mine, and let me know your thoughts on it. I think I'd like to get the feedback from you. Are you hearing what I'm hearing? Is what I'm doing bringing value to the whole process? That's kind of the reason why I do this. Anyway, please like, subscribe, comment, follow me on Instagram. My name is Ed Homewood. This is the Old Guy Hi-Fi channel. Now go print that playlist out, listen to it, and let me know your thoughts. Thanks so much. I appreciate your time. I hope you have a wonderful day.